I think the Necroport was always designed to do far more than just treat people to the beautiful death. I don't know what it was that Paddox was trying to achieve, but whatever it was, his actions have caused something infinitely terrible to be unleashed. If I had a clue as to what he was trying to do, it might give us some idea on what we're up against. Hello and welcome back to the Doctor Who Marathon. I'm your host McEdam, and today we're going to be talking about The Festival of Death by Jonathan Morris. This is the first novel that we'll be talking about. It was actually originally published back, I believe, in 2003 as part of the BBC books. However, when in 2013, for the 50th anniversary, the BBC reprinted 12 of their books, and this is the Fourth Doctor's contribution. So that's why I've got this really cool cover here. Usually for non-TV show stories, I make my own DVD covers. I haven't actually done this one for the novels, but I have designed one. If you want to look there, that's really cool. I'll put a link in the description if you want to have a better look at that. Just a heads up as well, I suffer from dyslexia, so I do struggle with reading, and it actually took me I believe like 10 or 11 days for me to complete this book. So I might get some few details wrong, a few names wrong. I do apologise, and yeah. So anyway, this is a novel I don't hear a lot of people talk about. I can't find a single review on the internet. I've seen some people have it in their collections and their collection videos, but they never bring up do they like it or not. So nobody really knows about this story. It seems to be a very overlooked story. Which is surprising because I thought this was amazing. Jonathan Morris gives out one of his best written works in this adventure. To start off with, he nails Tom Baker, Lalla Ward, and John Leeson's portrayal as the Doctor, Romana, and K9, and you literally can hear their voices when they're talking, especially at the start where the Doctor is basically trying to pass his test because he failed the test in the academy, and Romana's basically trying to teach him how to pilot the TARDIS properly, and if the Doctor fails, she'll have no choice from her mind but to take the TARDIS off the Doctor and let her pilot it. So a lot of great humour in this book. But the story starts off with the Doctor and Romana and K9 landing on the G-Lock, it's basically like a city in hyperspace, a connection between 2 points, and we get to learn about this backstory about how the mystery of the Cerberus. Originally, it was supposed to be like a leisure cruise ship, and it somehow got stuck in hyperspace by getting caught in the door, which shouldn't be possible. They should have stayed open forever, but they got stuck in there, and when the hyperspace tunnel was reopened, they found no survivors. No bodies were ever found, which is just so it's a big mystery. And many years later, this story takes place, and when the Doctor and Romana arrives, there's been some sort of a catastrophe. There's injured people everywhere, there's medics trying to help as much as they can, and Romana goes in to try and help along. And the Doctor tries to talk to a few people to try and find out what's been going on. However, something strange goes on, because the people he talks to, mainly a cameraman called Harkin Bett, knows who the Doctor is. In fact, he praises the Doctor for saving the G-Lock. And yeah, so already there's a bit of timey-wimey stuff. But however, there's been a call out that the Doctor and Romana are saboteurs that have actually caused the problems of the G-Lock. And so the first 3 chapters of the book is the Doctor basically working out that in his future he's going to go back in time and go through the events again. It's also here that we learn about McChief, like the controller of the G-Lock, who basically is like he's a stubborn prick, and he tries to get the Doctor to of the blame, so we can shush everything up and get back to business as usual. And they learn that there was a zombie attack of all things that has been attacking people, and suddenly out of nowhere the zombies all died, and so yeah. And the story picks up at a great pace, and we get introduced to another character who saves Romana earlier on. Because from her point of view, she's already met Romana, and Romana's told her to save her from the cell. Evelyn, I've called her. I think that's how you pronounce her name. And one thing Jonathan Morris is very good at in this book is the side characters. Hark and Bent and Evelyn, they are such lovely characters, and they boom with personality. Evelyn, for later on in the story, she sells tickets for something, which we'll get on to, and she's basically bored of her job. She originally wanted to plan, we learned that she wanted to go out to see the universe with her boyfriend, but her boyfriend left her for another girl, and she's been basically stuck here trying to get money so she can leave and basically explore the universe. And then we also got Hark and Bent, a off-the-wall documentary filmmaker who, after a pretty controversial moment in his past, which we'll get on to, he goes and teaches and basically tries to have this interview for the event, the Festival of Death, and gets caught up in the situation. But he's just such an average Joe that you really do root for these characters. And I think Jonathan Morris really gets out the personalities. It's also here that Romana gets introduced to another character, Hoppy, a lizard-like creature who's a bit of a hippie, who's a bit of a druggie. And when Romana is looking for some medics and stuff, and she finds out they're low on supplies, she gets the lizard actually tells Romana that there are some medications in his spaceship. So Romana goes there and she spots a little girl, and there's a little bit of mystery here, as it seems to be like a ghost figure, that this little girl that Romana's chasing through, and she gets introduced to this black void in a corridor, specifically corridor 79. And then Romana wakes up, which is really weird, and she just finds herself on the floor with a bag of Hoppy's drugs, but she gets caught up by some guards who believe that she's drug smuggling, and she gets captured as well, and this is where she gets introduced to Evelyn and stuff like that. So, yeah, the story picks up very good, and the first 3 chapters are great at actually setting up the story at the very end of the story. We, the audience, the Doctor and Romana, actually get introduced to the actual very end of the story, and we get to learn from behind the end of the story. However, a little twist, as when Evelyn helps the Doctor and Romana, she accidentally lets slip that in the Doctor's future, he's going to die. He's going to die to save the G-Lock and stop the zombies. She doesn't know much of the details, but she knows that the Doctor is going to die. And so the story has a bit of a morbid sense of it around the story, as the Doctor basically knows he's going to die, and he pulls a lot of jokes, and you can kind of see that the Doctor's just kind of trying to avoid being morbid about it. In fact, he seems really encouraging to find out how he dies, because he knows that that's the way he's going to save the G-Lock. So he wants to find out how he dies so he can save the G-Lock. That's very Tom Baker Doctor. Like, little concern about his own life. and is more curious about the concept of death than anything. So the Doctor basically stops McChief from believing they're all saboteurs and leads an evacuation because they find out that the tunnel is going to destroy everybody. So the Doctor stops McChief, sends an evacuation, and the Doctor and Romana go back in the TARDIS to go back a day earlier, and you think, okay, now the story's going to be a bit more straightforward. So the Doctor and Romana arrive during the Festival of Death because McChief, he has been working with a scientist called Paradox, and Paradox, what he does is he's made basically a carnival attraction called the Beautiful Death, and what this does is it kills its audience for a brief moment and then brings them back to life, letting them experience the afterlife. And yeah, that's and the story does play a lot into it. It's a very cool concept. And this is not like the first time it's happened. In the story, they explain that this Beautiful Death machine has been going for years and years and years. But Paradox wants to push it. He wants specifically 218 participants at one time during midnight. And the festival is to try and get attractions, to get people from all over the universe to come here and experience the Beautiful Death. And the Doctor clearly knows that something's going to go wrong, tries to investigate the Beautiful Death, and he learns that there's a machine underneath with unknown origins called the Nectroport, which has been, which he believes is powering the Beautiful Death, and he doesn't know how it's working or anything that's happening with it. He gets introduced to some scientists and Paradox and introduces himself, whilst Romana tries to gets caught up in a mess and gets introduced to Evening. And the Doctor gets reintroduced to Hark and Beth. There's only one problem with this. They still already know who they are. So it means the Doctor has to go back in time again. Whilst here, Romana is wandering around and she sees the Doctor just randomly going into the TARDIS. However, she gets back introduced to the Doctor and explains this, and the Doctor's like, I have no idea what you're on about. It's also here that we learn that Paradox has kept two aliens called the Abatons, or at least I call them the Abatons, a vegetable-like group of humanoids that have a mystical power, and it has something to do with the Nectroport, and when all is said and done, Paradox will achieve his ultimate achievement in science, and he will have his redemption, whatever that means. It's also important to note that at the start of the story, we get introduced to a little boy called Cal, in an event that's completely separated to the book, who gets, and he sees his mother and father die during a failed ship transport going, and it explodes, killing everybody on it, and he sees his parents die. We later learn that Kalos is Paradox. Yeah? Yeah. And so the Doctor tries to figure out how he's going to die, and the Beautiful Death happens, and something goes wrong, and the zombies start attacking. And the way they describe the zombies is really, really gruesome. They have black oil just dripping out their mouth, and they just attack people randomly. However, a few of them start to flicker in and out of existence as Romana notices time distortions like seen in City of Death. And so she sees two creatures, two of the same species as the lizard, and sees that they flicker in and out and they become humans. They explain that they have survived through the Cerberus, the original name for the G-Lock. However, they soon realise that they've been controlled by another creature called the Repulsion. a creature that lives in the barrier between life and death. A very cool mythological concept, the repulsion. I really like it here. It's also important to note that we don't really learn about anything about repulsion until we don't even hear his name until halfway through the book. But it makes the story go at a great pace because we're constantly learning something new, and it has a very cinematic feel. I could imagine this story being an entire season worth of classic Who, or at the least just a high budget movie. So, because it does play around with the TARDIS concept as the Doctor and Romana go back in time once more, and they basically just like picking up all the pieces that they're trying to work out. Romana introduces herself finally. The Doctor meets Harkin Bent for the first time and saves him as he goes into the Nectroport, and discovers that the Nectroport isn't powering the Beautiful Death. The Beautiful Death is powering the Nectroport, and it's going to do something, but every time this thing happens, Paddock has to sacrifice one of the Abatans, and one of them, Galia, already knows the Doctor, but he says, don't worry, you're not going to go back in time, I've always known who you are, which the Doctor is always puzzled by. And here we get to learn a bit about the Abatans' history. They are a race that basically, when they die, their consciousness goes back in time to their baby form, and they get to grow out their lives knowing everything that's going to happen in the future. And they lead what they call the path of perfection, where they basically make no mistakes because they've gone back in time constantly to revert time itself. So that's really cool. However, some time distortion's happening whilst the zombie attack is happening, and Romana fades out of existence, and she lands somehow in the Cerberus, which was the mystery ship beforehand where all the passengers went missing. At this point, then, when the Romana meets them, they're all about a month in the trapped, and they're starving, they're low on food. But whilst they're there, there's another race called the Anthropods that escaped from another ship that was trapped in the hyperspace. These spider creatures that can like detach their legs and arms and reattach them, and they can kill other ones and put their bodies onto theirs, and they also just eat any flesh, and they'll just basically eat anything. And one of the crew members, the captain, discovers the black void that Romana had seen in her dream, and goes in it and comes out and reveals that he's been talking to a creature called a repulsion, and he's going to save everyone only if everybody on the ship goes into the portal. And first off, Romana's like, no, don't do it, it's just using you. However, because she's from the future and she's seen what happens to him, and how when the ship was originally rescued, there was no survivors, she basically knows that she can't change the history. So she, with regret, lets them go into the Nectroport, into the repulsion's realm, its domain, by going into the void. So yeah, there's a lot going on, and the way I'm describing it probably sounds really confusing, and yeah, it is on a basic premise, but Jonathan Morris does a fantastic job at leading your hand. You only see the story through the Doctor and Romana's point of view, and because of that, we as an audience know where's what and what's what and who's who and stuff. So to basically sum up the rest of the story, the Doctor goes back in time. He meets Romana before, when Romana saw him disappearing. The Doctor travels back into the Cerberus, saves Romana. They go back into the future. The zombie attack has started again, and the Doctor realises the only way to stop the repulsion is by going into going into the beautiful death himself, and basically letting the repulsion basically come through him, and a plan which I won't spoil, but it is a really cool plot. And then basically the Doctor saves everyone. Paradox actually uses the Nectroport, and the last chapter has the boy, Kelos, having a voice in his head screaming at him, but the boy can't hear anything. So Paradox is trapped in a time loop of his entire life, doomed for eternity to just constantly go back in time, back and forth into time. But I've also summed up a few bits that I want to talk about. For example, Jonathan Morris is a huge fan of the works of Douglas Adams, who wrote previous Doctor Who stories like The Pirate Planet, City of Death, and Shada. And he also obviously wrote Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And Jonathan Morris is a huge fan of this era, and specifically Douglas Adams' work. And you can see that in this story. A lot of Douglas Adams' absurd humour spins in this story, like the lizard hippie, just the whole concept of them constantly going back in time. And there's also a robot called, it's like an intercom talking thing that talks through like the system, called Eric. And when the Doctor first meets Eric, it's actually a suicidal, depressed robot. And according to Eric, the Doctor had promised to kill it. We've later learn on, when we go back to flashbacks at the Cerberus, it was actually a really joyful, happy computer that just wanted to make everyone happy. But when the tunnel shut down, the captain made Eric believe it was his fault, and that's why he became so depressed, because he felt like it was all him. So, it's got a huge Douglas Adams influence on this story, and it really does work. Overall, Jonathan Morris has done a fantastic job. My God, this is a really great read. For those who don't there's a lot of people who don't talk about this story. Like I said, this is probably the first review on the internet that I've seen of which is myself. But it's a very underrated story, and it's a very underappreciated story, and I highly recommend, if you like novels, to go read it. I'm not going to really tackle a lot of novels in this marathon because, like I said, I'm dyslexic, and despite me really loving this book, as somebody who struggles to read, it was a struggle. But I know for a fact it's more me than the plot itself. So highly recommend Festival of Death. Go watch it. So join me next time, where we actually now watch some adverts as the Doctor and Romana are trying to save the universe with a bunch of computers. So join me next time for the Prime Computer advertisements. See you next time on the Doctor Who Marathon. Ta-da.